Hello everybody, That's It for Life here, bringing you guys a brand new Blast from the Past. This time around we are talking about the Roid deck. Now, back in GX, there was, I would say, two really big anime decks that Konami was kind of trying to push. One would later on become one of the biggest fan favorite decks, and of course I'm talking about Heroes. The other is just kind of looked at, laughed at, and kind of just shoved into a corner where nobody wants to see it or care about it. And that is Roids. Roids are not a very good deck. I mean, their stats are everywhere. Their monsters have varying degrees of decent to bad effects. And while their fusion monsters are cool, they are very specific in which monsters they need to be used with. And so we're going to talk about that today and kind of look over the deck and discuss what the deck needs and how Konami can make it better, especially since they've been looking at older decks and giving them legacy support. Now, this is one of those decks where they haven't really gotten any direct support in a long while, with the exception of being Parasitoid, which came out in, I think, the first Dragons of Legend, if my memory is correct. It might have come out in Dragons of Legend 2. But it really didn't do much for the deck, and they retooled it as just a generic card for any machine deck that can polymerization and fusion summon and stuff. So it's been a while since this deck has gotten any support that is made specifically for the deck. Although since they do have the Roid name in them, just like Speedroids, certain Speedroid cards will work for this deck as well. Just the ones that say Roid, but however, not many of those exist. Likewise, Roid spell and trap cards work with the Speedroids. Anyway, so the first card in the deck is Cyroid. I think this is actually one of the first Roids seen in the anime. But anyways, it's a normal monster for the deck. It's 800 attack, 1000 defense. He's not particularly great. It's a level 3. Yeah, and I love it how in the card text it says it can arm itself with training wheels, yet that equipped spell card for it never got released outside of the anime. Anyways, actually onto the good monsters in the deck, I suppose. When you tribute, okay, this card is Armor Roid. When you tribute summon this card by tributing at least one Roid monster, remove all spell trap cards on the field from play. Basically, this guy, he comes out, he's a heavy storm, but however, he removes them all from play. This guy is really, really freaking good, and I can even see him being somewhat relevant nowadays, because if you summon him, well, you're going to have to tribute off a Roid monster, but if you summon him, you can banish all spell and trap cards, and oh, hey, look at that, your opponent's pendulums are banished. The only issue is that he's a level 8, so he needs at least 2 tributes to normal summon. So, I don't see anybody playing him, but hey, heavy storm, but banishing everything. So, I actually really like this guy a lot, but in this deck especially, it's really hard for it to keep a board, unless you're spamming out fusions left and right. And even then, it's still hard for them to keep a board. Next up is Rescue Roid, another high tribute monster. This guy's at level 6, 1600 attack, 1800 defense. Terrible stats for a level 6. At least Armor Roid had really good stats for a level 8 and at 2700. But Rescue Roid, 1600 attack for a level 6. I mean, at least make that 2000 at the very least. Anyways, his effect is, when a Roid monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can return that monster to its owner's hand. So basically, the idea of this card is that, oh, your opponent ran over your, I don't know, decoy Roid, oh, hey, add it back to your hand. Not bad, but not particularly great either. My biggest issue with this guy is his stat line. If he had just 500 or 600 more attack, he'd be a lot better. Or since he's supposed to have more defense and attack, give him 2800 defense, something like that, so that he can actually stay on the field and you can keep recurring your monsters. 1600 attack and 1800 defense, he is not going to last on the field at all for very long at all, and that just really sucks. And that's one of the biggest issues with this deck, is that the monsters, some of them have really good effects but crappy stat lines. Anyways, next up is UFO Roid. Level 6, 1200 attack, 1200 defense. See what I mean? Crappy stats. Good effects. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one machine type monster, 1500 or less attack from your deck and face up attack position. So the idea behind this card is that he tutors out like 80% of the deck, if that. Yeah, like 80% of the deck. He can't get Steamroid, he can't get Rescueroid, he can't get Armoroid, but he can get another copy of himself. My biggest issue with this guy is he's freaking level 6. Why? Why is he not level 4 or 3? Okay, there is no reason I should have to tribute summon a monster whose whole idea with the card is that it's going to die in battle so I can summon out another copy of itself. No, if I wanted to do that, I could just play Giant Rat, okay? Everything in this deck is, well, most of it is friggin' Earth, although they're all over the place. But, like, 30% of the deck is Earth, so I could just play Giant Rat. Or I get Mother Grizzly for the water ones, or any of the other monsters have this exact same effect, but for attributes. And the key thing with those cards is they're level 4. This is level 6. That is terrible. This thing needs to be docked 2 levels, and I guess the attack and stat line would make more sense then. But seriously, this card is so just bad. Like, its only use is to go into friggin' UFO Roid Fighter. That's the only use this card has. Granted, yes, he could technically search out like 30% of the deck, or rather 80%, I suppose. But why would you waste a tribute summon just for that, when you could summon out another level 4? Like, let's say I have Drillroid out on field. Why do I want to summon this guy when I could just summon Jetroid, overlay into a Gear Gigant, and search? This thing is just so terrible. Like, it really is. And even back in the day when Roids were getting, like, expected to get new support every now and then, this card was still terrible. Next up is Steamroid. Okay, so I don't know what was up with Konami, but back then, a lot of monsters had this exact same effect. If this card attacks an opponent's monster, this card gains 500 attack during the damage step only. If this card is attacked by an opponent's monster, this card loses 500 attack during the damage step only. There's like 2 or 3 other monsters with this exact same effects. I can't remember their names right off the top of my head. But it's such a weird effect. He's really good for getting over stuff because he gets 500 attack, so that puts him at 2,300. But he goes down to 1,300 whenever he's attacked, and that is very, very annoying. But it allows you to bait out some other things because, like for instance, the Supercharge, which is one of the Roid's only 2 trap cards. Basically, when a Roid is targeted for an attack, you get to draw 2 cards, which is really good, and that's kind of baits that out. But I just wish he could just stay at an 1,800 attack. That's my biggest issue with him. Next up is Drillroid. If this card attacks a defense position monster, destroy that monster immediately with this card's effect without applying damage calculation. This guy actually saw some competitive play back when flip effect monsters were rampant. What this guy does is whenever he attacks a defense position monster, he destroys it immediately. No flipping it up or anything. So your opponent doesn't get the flip effect, and so you don't have to worry about, like, oh, if that's a Man-Eater Bug or a Magician of Faith or any sort of the other really good flip effect monsters at the time, you didn't have to worry about it. Now, nowadays, that's not as big of a thing, but however, he's still useful for getting over huge defense monsters like Diamond Crab King, Dragon, Pit Magician, if I remember right. That's always summoned in defense. Rafflesia, stuff like that. He's really good for getting over obnoxious defense position monsters, and I like that. I kind of wish he had a bit more attack points. 1,600 isn't bad, but it's not great, really, very much. But he's one of the few actually good Roid monsters. Next up is Jetroid, and by the way, whenever I say actually good, I mean like good in terms of attack and effect. So next up is Jetroid. Level 4, 1,200 attack, 1,800 defense. At the time this card is selected as an attack target by an opponent's monster, you can activate trap cards from your hand. This is a funny card, okay? So let's say I have Supercharge, Reckless Greed, and a Mirror Force in my hand, and my opponent attacks this guy. I can activate all 3 from my hand right then and there. So, yeah, your opponent never really wants to attack this thing. I kind of wish I wish its stats were swapped so he had 1,800 attack and 1,200 defense. That would make a lot more sense. But however, he's not bad. I mean, I wish his attack and defense were soft. That's really my only issue with this card. But being able to use traps from your hand whenever he's selected as an attack target is really, really good. And it just basically allows you to fool your opponent into some mind games and thinking, oh, does he have a Mirror Force in his hand or something? Stuff like that. It's a really good monster. Only issue is the attack and defense. Next up is Roid. I remember this one was used a lot in the show. So, once per turn during your main phase, you can look at one face-down card your opponent controls, and then return it to its original position. He has 1200 attack and 1200 defense. He's not particularly great. I mean, okay, yeah, you can get some information on your opponent's set cards, but that's not really all that great either. I mean, he has crappy stats. You can't look at your, I mean, you can't, like, do anything else to your opponent's stuff. I mean, I suppose you could, like, look at it and see that, oh, that's a Vanities. Okay, cool, I can MST it and just get rid of it now. But it's just not particularly great either. If it was like up to twice per turn or something, I could see that being a bit better. But it's okay. I mean, my biggest issue with this card is that he has crappy stats. Okay, and his effect is just kind of meh. That's my two big issues. His effect is kind of just meh, and his stats are just crappy for a level 4, especially nowadays. Now, granted though, back in GX era, yeah, like for like the first set in the GX era, that wasn't too terrible. But nowadays, that is very passable for a level 3, I suppose. Next up is Roid. If this card attacks, destroy one spell or trap card at the end of the battle phase if you control another Roid monster. He's level 4, 1200 attack, 0 defense. Okay, why does a monster with 1200 attack have an effect that has to do with attacking? Okay, this thing's never going to run over any monsters. Or if it does, it's going to be like very, very crappy stat lines. And it's never, like, you wouldn't attack into a high defense monster because you'll take a crap ton of damage. Okay, I'm going to attack into that Revosia. Okay, take 13, pop your Pendulum. I mean, I suppose that's not terrible. I mean, yeah, sure, you get to, it's basically a walking MST. But he has just so bad stats. This is another case with the Roids where it has a decent effect, but crappy stat line. I mean, no defense whatsoever. Okay, and I understand the no defense. Okay, you want this thing to attack, but why does it have 1200 attack if you want this thing to attack? Like, seriously. Seriously. This card is just not great at all. And because of its crappy stats. That effect would be really good if it had better stat line. Like, make it a 1900 level 4. There you go. And look at that. 1900 level 4, if he attacks, you get to pop a spell or trap card. That's really good. Especially since you have to control another Roid monster. You can't just have him out and do it by himself. You have to have another Roid. And generally speaking, because of his crappy stat line, you're going to attack with something else first. And, oh, hey, look at that. That's that D-Prison that you could have popped with Stealth Roid. Or baited out with Stealth Roid instead of getting D-Prison on your Steam Roid, which would really, really suck. So, biggest issue of Stealth Roid, crappy stat line. He needs to have, like, at least 1800 or 1900 attack. Next up is Truck Roid. 1000 attack, 2000 defense. For a truck, this kind of makes sense. But anyways, when this card destroys a monster your opponent controls by battle and sends it to the graveyard, equip it to discard. This card gains attack equal to the combined attack of the equipped monsters. This guy can get beefy really fast, especially if you can, like, increase his attack or something. Like, can you imagine, like, Book of Mooning your opponent's oh wait, no, that won't work. Can you imagine, like, Book of Mooning your opponent's Stratos and attacking over it with Truck Roid? I believe Stratos has like 800 defense. So attacking over it with Truck Roid and then equipping Stratos onto this thing, and then Truck Roid becomes a 2800 beat stick. And oh hey, look at that, you can run over your opponent's Dark Magician. Or, well, I suppose if we were still going with the Stratos thing, you could run over your opponent's Nova Master. And oh hey, look at that, 2600 more attack points. On top of the 1800 he already gained. That can get really, really high up. The biggest issue I have with this card is that he already has a crappy stat line, like in terms of attack power. I mean, it kind of makes sense considering that he can get really beefy kind of fast. But, however, that 1,000 attack makes it where he can't really get over big beefy monsters. My other issue of this card is that it has to be sent to the graveyard, and so you can't run over a pendulum and equip it onto this card. Whenever I was like thinking up the like, oh, there are various different like things that you can run over and take over for a equip card, I was like, oh, it's Joker back to Joker, and then like, oh wait, this thing has to be sent to the graveyard. So yeah, pendulums are not going to work with this thing. But however, anything else, it's fair game. I mean, my only real issue is that he is really not very great attack. I mean, 1,500 attack would have made him a bit more better. But however, yeah, I feel like that if he had 1,500 more attack, he'd be a lot better. Now then, next up is Shuttle Roid. This card is actually an OCG exclusive. We don't have him yet, which surprises me because it's okay, but it's not gonna do anything for the deck. Anyway, so Shuttle Roid, Machine Wind, 1,000 attack, 1,200 defense. Again, why can't those stats be swapped in a bit higher? Because it's a level 4. Anyways, when this card is targeted for an attack, you can banish this card. If it is banished by this effect, special summon it during your next standby phase. Eliminate a special summon by this effect, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. I kind of like this effect, to be honest. Okay, so your opponent attacks it, you can banish Shuttle Roid, next standby phase, he comes back, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent, which is kind of like him attacking directly. He's not bad, but he's not particularly great either. I mean, again, like, you're not going to be attacking with this guy, you're going to be maybe just sitting on him in defense, and your opponent's going to try and attack him, he's going to go into the banish zone, and then you're going to get to punch your opponent for 1,000 during the next standby phase. Now, theoretically, you could do this 8 times and finish off your opponent, but let's face it, most games don't last 8 turns. So, while I think his effect is okay, he doesn't really do much for the deck, and that's another big thing for the Roid deck in general, is that while they have a wide variety of decks, very few of them, not decks, effects, very few of them actually do anything for the Roid monsters, like Rescue Roid. He's the one monster we've covered so far that has any influence with the other Roids, and Armor Roid just needs to be tribute something by tributing a Roid. So, yeah, and it doesn't really change much from here on out. Anyways, when an opponent... Okay, so next up is Carrier Roid. When an opponent activates a card effect that targets and destroys a spell or trap card you control, you can discard one card and negate its activation and destroy it. So, this basically negates MST. And that's about it. You can also negate Twin Twister, but it's really not that great. I mean, okay, yes, theoretically, I mean, if you want to protect, like, I don't know, your face down supercharged and your opponent tries to Twin Twister it, you can negate that, but generally speaking, I mean, I can see how this guy's good, but he has crappy stat lines. Like, that's another big... you're going to see that as my most common complaint with this deck, is the crappy stats for the respective levels. This is 1,000 by 800. That's more like a stat line for level 3 or level 2. It's like other stat lines are like either are like for freaking monsters that are like 1 or 2 levels below them. But oh my god, this card is okay. It really is. Again, it doesn't do much for the deck, but it does protect your spells and traps, which I like, but it's also not particularly great. Also, most people don't main deck back row destruction, which is, I think, silly, but oh well. Next up, Submarine Roid. This is one of the ones that people actually like played for a little bit because of his pretty decent effect. And I remember a friend of mine who had a Roid deck. He loved this card, and it was so freaking obnoxious because he had protected so much. So, this guy has 800 attack, 1800 defense. You'll understand why here in a second. This card can attack your opponent directly, but when it does so, using this effect, the battle damage inflicted to your opponent is the original attack of this card. Okay, so basically that means you can't equip him with a Axe of Despair, give him 1800 attack, and then an attack directly for 1800. No, this thing will always do 800 damage to your opponent. If this at the end of the damage step, if this card attacked or was attacked, you can change this card to defense position. So I got a bit tongue-tied there. So yeah, he has the Dante effect where he switches to defense after he attacks. So It's okay. I mean, you poke your opponent for 800, he switches to defense, and he has 1800 defense. Back in the day, I can see how this would be really, really good, especially like in GX era, where not many monsters had more than 1800 attack points that were easy to summon. So, yeah, back in those days, yeah, really good card. Nowadays, not so much. um, there's so many ways to get over it. I mean, I like the effect, don't get me wrong, but however, it just doesn't really do much. Also, I wish that it didn't make it to where you always do 800 damage with this card. That's a bit annoying. Next up is Express Roid, arguably one of the best cards in this deck. When you summon this card, you can add up to 2 Roid monsters. Sorry, you can add 2 Roid monsters from your graveyard to your hand except itself. So whenever this card is summoned, add 2 Roid monsters from your graveyard. That is really good, and just allows you to go for more fusion plays. Also, since it says Roid, you can use this guy with Speed Roids, although I wouldn't really recommend it. But however, this guy is really good. I like him, just being able to get back your stuff. I hate how he has 400 attack and 1600 defense, especially since, generally speaking, when you use this guy's effect, you're going to be normal summoning him, because this deck has no inherent way of special summoning your own monsters, with the exception of Wonder Garage, which is very, very annoying. Anyways, next up is Gyroid. This is one of the first Roid monsters along with Steamroid. So he's okay. Let's get on to this. He's a Machine Wind, level 3, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. Hey, look at that! Stat lines that actually match the level of a monster. So, once per turn, if this card would be destroyed by battle, it is not. I like that effect. It protects your life points, he stays on field for a bit longer, and you can just use him for your fusion summons and stuff without having to really worry about him being destroyed just yet. He's an okay card. Next up is Ambulance Roid. When a Roid monster is added from your graveyard to your hand, you can special summon that monster. So obviously he works well with Rescue Roid, because it kind of goes hand in hand since Ambulance and Rescue Roid. But however, here's the big issue. He's level 3, 1200 attack. Sorry, 1200 defense, 300 attack. That's not very, very great at all. That is like absolutely terrible. So he's not gonna stay in the field for very long, and you would have to like run double summon or something to get both Ambulance Roid and Rescue Roid out onto the field. And even then, they only work well together with this little dude, Decoy Roid. Look at it. It's honestly kind of adorable. It's a level 2, 300 attack, 500 defense. When this face-up card on your side of while this card is face-up on your side of the field, your opponent cannot select a monster to attack as an attack target except this guy. So these guys all work together, and I'm sure you're wondering, like, okay, well, how well do they work together? Guys, watch the GX anime episode where Cyrus, the guy who plays the Roids, duels against Hasselberry, the guy who plays a dinosaur deck. Okay, that shows just how good this this 3-card combo can be in a certain situation. Basically, in that episode, Cyrus got these two out. I think I forgot how he did it. Oh yeah, he fusion summoned for Ambulance Rescue Roid and then defusioned and got out Decoy Roid. Hasselberry had out Ultimate Tyranno. Now, for those who don't know, Ultimate Tyranno says this card must attack, and it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. He's a 3,000 by, I believe, 2,000 attack point monster and 2,000 defense. It's a really good dinosaur. Anyways, God, what else did he have? He had a card called Cyber Summon Blaster out, where every time a machine monster is special summoned, your opponent takes 300 damage. So basically, since Ultimate Tyranno must attack, it kept attacking Decoy Roid. Decoy Roid would go back to Cyrus's hand, do the Rescue Roid, and then Ambulance Roid would special summon it back out. And then, okay, Decoy Roid would be back out on the field, and Ultimate Tyranno would have to attack it again. And every time this happens, Cyrus's opponent would take 300 damage, which it was like one of the actual few legitimate combos that can happen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I could see that happening against, like, Boojins or something. Nobody plays Ultimate Tyranno these days. But it was such a cool and funny card combo, and I honestly have always kind of wanted to do it in real life. So, yeah, That's how these three work together, and that's really all that these three are good for, is just getting into an infinite loop. Anyways, so that's all the monsters. As you can see, a very mixed bag, but for the most part, they're crappy. Like, for the most part. I mean, the biggest issue is that the ones that have good effects have crappy attack. The ones that have good attack, and the ones that have good attack don't really have all that great effects. But they have one of the best fusion spell cards in the game. Send to a graveyard from your side of the field fusion material monsters that are listed on a Fiat fusion monster, and special summon that fusion monster from your fusion deck. This special summon is treated as a fusion summon. The fusion monster special summoned by this effect cannot be destroyed by the effects of spells, traps, and effect monsters, and its effects cannot be negated. So, what does this do? Well, you fusion summon out one of the Fiat monsters. It cannot be destroyed by spell, trap, and monster effects, and its effects cannot be negated. So even if your opponent Phoenix chains it, it won't be able to attack, but oh hey, you can still use its effects. That is really, really insane. This is a really good fusion spell. It just summons out your monster. You don't have to worry about it getting TT'd. You don't have to worry about it getting Boundless. You don't have to worry about it getting Darkhold or Geki'd, Excidon Knighted, Judgment Dragon. Anything that would destroy it does not destroy it. You have to kill it by battle. And its effect can't be negated. Your opponent can't effect failure it. They can't break through skill it. They can't Phoenix chain it. Well, they could Phoenix chain it. It just won't be able to attack, but its effects won't be negated. That is really insane. The only issue with this card is that not all of the fusion monsters are called Fiat Roids. In fact, exactly two. There's exactly two. There's two Fiat monsters. And they both need 3 monsters to fusion summon into. Well, actually no. Stealth Union needs 4 monsters to go into. Jumbo Drill needs 3. So, yeah. Yeah, you're not going to be really going into these guys very much, if ever. And this card's going to be dead in your hand. A lot. This card, the biggest issue is that these guys, not all these guys are called Fiat Roids. That is the biggest issue. So you can summon Jumbo Drill and you can summon Stealth Union, which is really good fusion spell. But you can't summon any of the others. And that's why Cyrus is supposed to be played Power Bond in the anime. And Polymerization. Now then, Wonder Garage, trap card. When this face down card is sent to the graveyard, you can spell summon 1 level 4 or lower machine type Roid monster from your hand. 2 issues with this card. First and foremost, it does nothing until it's destroyed. Okay? Let's face it, it's not going to do anything until either you or your opponent MST or Twin Twisters it. Secondly, it summons it from the hand. It summons the monster from the hand. Why can't I summon it from the deck? That would be a lot better, and it'd be a lot less situational. But because it says from the hand, I have to basically make sure that I always have a level 4 or lower Roid monster in my hand in the off-case chance that my opponent does MST or Twin Twister it, or use Dragon Pit Magician's effect on it. It's just not a great card at all. They have one other trap, we already covered it, but I'll cover it again real quick anyways. Supercharge, activate only when your opponent declares an attack, while the only monsters you control are machine type Roid monsters. Draw 2 cards. Really good card. It lets you draw 2 cards. My biggest issue with it is that it's a trap, and you gotta wait for your opponent to attack your monsters. That's my biggest issue with it. So, now then, onto the fusion monsters. We're going to go this away so that we can go from their weakest to their ultimate boss monster. So, first and foremost, Parapsychoid. Level 5, 1600 by 1200, 2 machine type monsters with the same name. This card can attack your opponent directly. So, at first it doesn't seem like much. Okay, it's 1600. Guys, if you power bond into this thing, it becomes a 3200 monster that can attack directly. That is insane and really funny. I've actually done it in Cyber Dragons a few times. I don't actually have the card, so I can't play it in Cyber Dragons in real life, but I've done it a few times on my Devpro, and it's a lot of fun. Just power bonding into this thing for 3200. Next up is Steam Dry Roid. Level 6, 2200 by 1600, he needs Gyroid and Steamroid, these two, to go into, and he has 2200 attack. No effect. Yeah, and by the way, this is like the most commonly summoned fusions monster that Cyrus used. But hey, if you power bond into it, it becomes a 4400 beat stick. That's about it. That's the only good thing about this card is that it can become a 4400 beat stick. If you just poly into it, it's a 2200 beat stick. And not even a good one at that. Granted, it can get over Flame Wingman, but that's Jaden's like old boss monster. That's about it. Next up is Ambulance Rescue Roid. 2300 attack by 1800 defense. Rescue Roid and Ambulance Roid, so these two. This sorry, I got like tongue-tied for a second. This monster cannot be special summoned except by fusion summon. You notice that like almost none of the others have that effect. Once per turn, when a monster on your side of the field is from a battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon that monster in defense position. So it kind of like has an improved effect of Rescue Roid. No, Ambulance Roid. Oh hey, you killed my Druid. Oh, it comes back in defense. It's not terrible, but its stats aren't very great. But hey, with Power Bond, it becomes a 4600 beat stick. Next up is Super Fiacroid Jumbo Drill. Steamroid, Drillroid, and Submarine Roid. So you need Steamroid, Drillroid, and Submarine Roid for some reason. Fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion material monsters, so you cannot use King of the Swamp or any of the other fusion substitute monsters. During battle between this attacking card and a defense position monster whose defense is lower than the attack of this card, inflict the difference as battle damage to your opponent. So a monster that needs 3 monsters to go into, has no built-in protection, and all it does is piercing. Okay, that is not very good. Granted, if you summon it with Power Bond, it becomes 6,000, but generally speaking, you're not going to want to summon this thing with Power Bond, but you're going to want to summon it with Fiacroid Connection Zone, because this is arguably one of the best fusion spells in the game, and protects your monster from pretty much everything that does not target. Yeah, it's not very great at all. I mean, hey, it's a 3k piercer, that's about all it's really got for it, but next up is Super Fiacroid Stuff Union. Really cool looking monster, really cool name. Its effect is kind of meh. Anyway, so it needs Truckroid, Expressroid, and Drillroid. So, Truckroid, Expressroid, Drillroid, and Stuffroid. So yeah, 4 monsters to go into this thing. It's 3,600, 3,000. I think that's actually the same stat line as Great Magnus, and it has a similar like look to it. This guy is a giant like Megazord. When this card attacks, its original attack is halved until the end of the damage step. What? During battle between, it does piercing, inflicted differences, battle damage to your opponent. Once per turn during your main phase, you can select 1 face-up monster on the field, except a machine monster, and equip it to this card. While equipped by this effect, this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. So, it does piercing, can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each by sucking up a monster, so it's basically a 1-on-1 that can attack everything. And whenever it attacks, it becomes half of 36, which I actually don't know how much that is, but it's in the like thousands. Now, let me just do that math real quick. Half of 36, guys. That is... Let's see here. Yeah, I'm terrible at mental math, so 3,600 divided by 2. That's 1,800, guys. 1,800. This thing drops to 1,800 when it attacks. They have... This is another issue with Roids that I have. They have subpar fusion monsters. They are ultra specific. They have varying degrees of good attack and good effects. If this card did not have that very first line of text on it, when this card attacks, its original attack is halved until the end of the damage step. If it did not have that, this card would be amazing. This would make the deck entirely worth playing. Can you imagine that? A 3600 beat stick that does piercing, that can suck up a monster, and can attack all of your opponent's monsters directly, once each. That's amazing! Why is this not happening? And that gives you fusion summoning with Very Great Connection Zone. It cannot be destroyed by spells, traps, or effect monsters, and its effects cannot be negated. Konami, what, were you guys afraid of this deck being too good? Because even if this guy did not have that first line of text, you still can't fix the main issue of the monsters. Okay, look at how many monsters there are, guys. There are 17 monsters. This deck has 3 spell and trap cards, 2 traps, 1 spell. And like barely even half of the Roid monsters are worth playing. And heck, their fusion monsters are not very great at all. Like, this is a deck that Konami tried to make good, but failed miserably at. People talk about Ice Barriers being one of the worst decks of all time. At least they have lockdowns they can do. This deck can't even do that. Heck, it can summon its boss monster, but oh hey, it halves its attack points when it attacks. This is one of the biggest issues with the deck. It's like they're limiting themselves. It is so stupid. It's like, oh hey, we have a good effect but crappy stats. Oh, we have good stats but crappy effects. Oh hey, I'm an ultra awesome boss monster that can attack everything that my opponent has, but I use half of my attack power because I like holding myself back. That is so stupid. So incredibly stupid. Anyways, moving on because I could easily rant about this for an hour and we're already almost 40 minutes in. Next up is UFO Roid Fighter. UFO Roid plus 1 warrior type monster. This guy was literally made just for a tag duel with Cyrus and Jaden, who were tag teaming up. I mean, heck, even the monsters that they use for the summon are even in the card art. UFO Roid, and I think it's Elemental Hero Tempest, if I remember correctly. Anyways, a fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion materials. The original attack and defense of this card become equal to the combined original attack of the 2 fusion material monsters you use for the fusion summon of this card. Believe it or not, but there's actually a bit of an LTK around this thing. Okay, because it needs UFO Roid. So that's going to be at base 1200 attack and 1200 defense. Then you use like the strongest warrior monster in the game, which I think I can't remember what that monster has. I'm just gonna look at that. Warrior, strongest warrior monster in the game right now. No, what's this to effect? Is Gate Guardian. So 1200 plus 3750. And then, if you power bond into it, it becomes a crap ton more attack power, and you can possibly even LTK with it. The issue with that is it's just not very good. This monster has no built-in protection. Yeah, you can get a crap ton of attack power, because, let's see here, I'm going to pull up my calculator again, since I already have it up. So, 3750 plus 1200. That is 4950 times 2. That's 9,900. So, if you power bond into this thing with Gate Guardian and UFO Roid, you can get a monster with 9,900 attack power that can potentially one-shot your opponent. That kind of stuff does not happen these days. And yeah, you can build a whole deck around it and everything, but UFO Roid is a non-searchable level 5 monster. Gate Guardian is a non-searchable level 11 monster. So, good luck with that. Oh wait, actually, no wait, there's Fusing Inscription now, but you can always search for UFO Roid. Yeah, I actually forgot about all the new fusion stuff that could help this deck out because it gets to all your stuff, but still, this deck is it's just not very great. And now for the ultimate boss monster. I don't actually remember Cyrus ever using this card. Barbaroid, the ultimate battle machine, 5 machine type Roid monsters. Alrighty, so we have a monster that needs 3, a monster that needs 4, now we have a monster that needs 5 monsters to go into. Also, since this guy is not a field card, you cannot use field card connection zone with it, which is annoying. He's a 4,000 by 4,000 monster. This card can attack twice during the same battle phase. This card cannot attack directly, which sucks. After damage calculation, if this card attacked an opponent's monster, negate the effects of that monster, including in the graveyard. If this card destroys an opponent's monster in battle, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. This guy is how you make a boss monster, Konami. This guy is how to make a boss monster and then limit what it can do. A monster that you have to put in that amount of effort, that amount of monsters to go into. Granted, this guy needs any 5, okay? Which, thank God. Otherwise, if it needed 5 specific Roid monsters, this thing would be terrible. Especially since there's no such thing as a Machine Miracle Fusion yet. I say yet because I really want one. So, it's easier to summon, kind of, but you're going to use your entire hand. Oh, and if you power bond for it, it's going to be 8,000, and you're going to take 4,000 points of damage at the end phase. But still, generally speaking, that's going to require your entire hand for one boss monster that can attack twice, can't attack directly, doesn't do piercing, which is strange considering all the other 2 boss monsters in the deck do it. And, okay, yeah, he does 1,000 damage. Woohoo! Mountebank Creator effect. I mean, okay, yeah, Mountebank Creator could protect this thing, but that's like, you'd have to build a deck like really around this. And really, right now, that's how you play Roids, is you build a deck around this big guy. And it's not very good. It really sucks. Because, well, he's a really good boss monster, don't get me wrong. He has no self-protection. He has no way of keeping himself on the board. And you can't even game your opponent with him, unless, like, your opponent has a bunch of weak little monsters out. And even then, it's going to be, like, your opponent will probably have 1,000 life points left, knowing my luck. So, Barboroid is a really cool monster. He's not enough to save the deck. I mean, if the deck had Barboroid and Stealth Union without this first line of text, then this deck would be passable. But right now, as it is, considering how crappy the monsters are, like the varying degrees of crappiness they are, and how specific and like just underdeveloped, that's the best word that I can think of for this deck, is underdeveloped. Like, it's like Konami wanted just a Machine Fusion-oriented deck to rival the Cyber Dragons, which is infinitely better than this deck. Like, the one thing that I have to say about this deck that is, like they have going for it, like, for everything, is that the designs are really cool. Or at least for the most part. I mean, I really do kind of like the designs of these monsters. But, they're just not good, and, this deck, I have never seen Roids win a duel, ever. I'm going to be honest, I've never seen them win a duel, ever. So, this deck has just so many problems. That's really all I got to say. So, what do they have in the anime? Well, not much, since most of it got printed, but they do have a few cards from the manga and a few cards from the anime. So, let's look at them. Dragon Roid. Machine Wind, 2,900 attack and 1,000 defense. While this card is in the graveyard, it's a dragon. Huh? It's a level 8, so I guess it's a trade-in target. So that'd go along with Armoroid. But what purpose does this card have? Granted, yes, I know what this card did in the anime. Well, what the purpose of this card was for in the anime. Cyrus got brief control over the Cyber Dark monsters, and for those who don't know, the Cyber Dark monsters, basically they all focus around on having dragons in the graveyard and stealing them. And anyways, so that was the whole idea with this card. Is, oh hey, Cyrus has a dragon in his deck. Kind of, not really, no, and it has a crap ton of attack power, so, oh hey, Cyber Dark Dragon gets 2,900 more attack points, plus 100 for every card in the graveyard, so it gets an incredibly high amount of attack points, and Cyrus can actually win a duel. That's all Dragon Roid does. He's not good for the deck at all. Like, he doesn't do anything. This card being printed unless Konami give it some kind of crazy effect. We did nothing for the deck. Strict Roid, a monster from the manga. 1600 attack, level 4, 400 defense. This is how you make a passable level 4, guys. Okay, Konami, seriously. Why does it have 1600 attack? Why does every freaking level 4 in this deck have at least 1600 attack? Anyways, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 800 life points to return it to your hand. I like that effect. Get it back to your hand. Oh, look at that. Drew Poly. Fusion Summon. There you go. Not a bad effect. I kind of wish he did something else along with that, but hey, whatever. He goes back to your hand and you get to Fusion Summon stuff. Kite Roid. Level 1, 200 attack, 400 defense, Machine Wind. During damage calculation, when your opponent attacks you directly, you can discard this card, you take no battle damage. Once per duel, when you would take battle damage from a direct attack while this card is in the graveyard, you can banish this card. Any battle damage you would receive becomes 0. So it protects your life points, and it can do it twice. I like this card a lot. Honestly, I do. It saves your butt, and because you're going to get attacked directly a lot with this deck, because your monsters aren't going to do anything to protect you. On to the spells. Ultimate Machine Union. Remove Roid Fusion monsters in your graveyard from play and Fusion Summon 1 Fusion Roid. This card needs to be a thing. Actually, we just need a generic fusion, like Miracle Fusion for any machine type monster. But this really needs to be a thing for this deck. This would help out the deck so much. You could actually, I don't know, go for Stealth Union on a consistent basis. You could go for Barbaroid and not use up your entire hand. This would be really, really good if this was printed. I think this would help the deck out a lot. It wouldn't fix all of its problems, but it would fix out one of its big issues of Fusion Summoning. So yeah, this card needs to be printed. Like ASAP, Konami. Come on, do it. Support mission. Click play, spell card. Activate only when they face up a Roid monster you control select as an attack target. Add 1 Roid monster from your deck to your hand. This card also needs to be printed. This deck has no searching whatsoever, aside from Gear Gigant, which isn't for this deck, technically speaking. So, Konami, what are you doing? Get on with it. Make this card. I have no issue with this card. This card needs to be a thing. This card needs to be a thing like ASAP. Like right now. It would help out the deck quite a bit. And I mean, it wouldn't fix all of its problems, like Ultimate Machine Union. Neither of these would fix all of its problems, but it would certainly help out a lot. Training Wheels, the card for Cyroid that we never got out of the anime. Equip spell card. Equip only to a Cyroid. It can attack your opponent directly. Okay. If the equipped monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent by a direct attack, banish this card into the equipped monster until your next standby phase. So you can attack your opponent directly, a Cyroid, and Training Wheels gets banished too. And then during your next standby phase, they both come back. And then hey, you can attack your opponent again directly. It's not terrible, but like it won't do anything for Roids because no Roid deck actually plays Cyroid because he's crap. And there's no fusion monster that actually requires him, so there's no reason to play him. Anyways, on to the next one. Roid Reinforcements. Discard any number of cards from your hand to the graveyard and select a number of Roid monsters equal to the number to the cards you discarded and add them to your hand. So it's Beckoning Light, but for Roids. It's a funny little card. If this was printed, I think it wouldn't do really much of anything unless like you have a handful of Roids and you want like a specific few Roids out of your graveyard. So it's okay, but I don't see it doing much for the deck if it were printed. Funny little card, but not much. So, overall, what does the deck need? It needs better monsters. It could do with Ultimate Machine Union as well, and Support Mission. These cards need to be printed ASAP. I also feel like Kite Roid would help out a bit, but for the most part, they need more monsters. They also need a way to search, and they need better fusion monsters. Like, they really, really need better fusion monsters, okay? Don't get me wrong. A few of these, like, 2 of them are good, and Self-Union is only kind of meh, and you would be a lot better if you didn't have that first line of text. But the fusion monsters are very underwhelming. They feel underdeveloped. And why does Steam's Gyroid have no effect? Like, at all? Why does they not have at least piercing damage? It makes sense. at the very least, or any way to increase its attack or something. It's a friggin' combination of a helicopter and a friggin' train. It should have a really cool effect. I mean, you're combining a train and a helicopter. It should have a really cool effect. In short, this deck is very underdeveloped. Konami did not plan this deck at all. Like, they did not plan its future at all. Very few of the monsters do anything for each other. Very few of the monsters work with each other. Very few of the monsters actually have good effects. This deck there's so much bad with it. Okay? Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, on the, like, deck goodness scale, I put this at, like, a 3. Maybe a 4 if it gets Ultimate Machine Union. It needs more ways to search. Like, it needs a way to search, in general. And it needs better monsters, and it needs a way to fuse and summon from graveyard. That's what it needs, okay? Like, out of all the anime and manga stuff, only these 3 are really worth printing. Strikelight's okay, but really only these 3 are worth printing. This deck has a lot of issues, and I know it's a big fan favorite deck from GX, but it's just, there's so much wrong with it. Like, oh my god. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any ideas for what this deck could use, please leave them in the comments below. And thank you all for watching, guys. Peace out. See you on the next Blast from the Past.